into Numbers. Here we go. All right. So Numbers covers the period from their time at Sinai and runs to the arrival at the borders of Canaan 40 years later. So it starts at their time at Sinai and runs 40 years later. Now, we learn in Deuteronomy that the distance from Horeb, which is Sinai, to the Promised Land is 11 days' journey. That's pretty painful, huh? That here they are, 11 days from entering the Promised Land, and it's going to be 40 years. And they're all going to die. 11 days. Man, it's painful. It's painful to think about. So, the opening comes from with the beginning of them taking a census. But we have to connect Numbers, the opening of Numbers, somehow to the ending of Leviticus. They tend to correlate. They tend to work together. Okay, so let's think about Genesis. Let's just do some book endings. Okay, Genesis begins with what's like a big summary of Genesis 1 and 2, probably. This is the best way to say Genesis opens. What does Genesis open with? New world and what's the pinnacle of the new world? Man. He's created last. He's given dominion over the whole world. So you got a new world and you've got man. Okay? And then you fast forward to the end of Genesis, and what do you have? You've got kind of both, don't you? Do you have like a new world situation going on? Everybody on the whole earth is coming to Adam. So that's like a new world, right? The whole earth is involved. And then you've got your man, Adam, or Joseph, which is like Adam. But Joseph, that the Adam-like character, is embalmed in Egypt, outside of the land. Okay? So that sets us up for Egypt. Because what is Israel like in Egypt? They are like a dead man. They're down in Egypt. We know that Egypt are experts at death, because when Joseph gets sold, they're selling embalming material. Then every time you go into Egypt, you go down into Egypt. And then Joseph even goes more down in a pit in Egypt. Okay? And so it's very much like Egypt is death. They are getting killed. They're getting beat. It's dark. They're crying out to the Lord from the grave, as it were. Okay? So you see then, at least at this point, how the beginning of Genesis to the end of Genesis picks up at Exodus. Joseph's dead in a tomb. His descendants are dead in a tomb. And they're starting to resurrect, right? And even you've got Jacob kind of being a foreshadowing of what's going to happen to Israel, because his dead body is carried into the Promised Land, and all of Egypt sort of escorts him. Okay, so you've got this movement that Israel is going to resurrect in Egypt. Okay? And so then they resurrect in Egypt, and you find them doing what? And they are resurrecting because they're multiplying like crazy, right? They're coming to life. Okay? Just thinking big picture. So they're coming to life, but what are they doing? in Egypt at the beginning of Exodus? They're building Pharaoh's city. So they're making a name for Pharaoh is what they're doing. They're building a city for Pharaoh. And so that makes it really easy to understand then the end of Exodus, how that complements it. Because how does Exodus end? Building a house or a city for God. And it is really helpful to think of it even as a city. It is a house, for sure. It's God's house. But there's a tent formation around that house, which makes it a city. It's like the capital of Addis, right? Is where God lives. And then you've got a surrounding city, that type of idea. And a lot of times, so in the States, at least on the East Coast, where the United States was settled by the Europeans, what you find is most towns are built around a church. That's how they used to do it. And we'll see why in Numbers in just a second. But center church, it was at the center of the city. When the U.S. was trying to do what's right, they would build the church at the center. It's not, and churches used to be the tallest until 1830s. The tallest building in the U.S. For sure, I'm not sure more than that, but tallest building in the U.S. was a church in New York City. But it's kind of interesting how businesses have gotten to be taller than churches. See, churches always used to direct your attention up. Like they'd have high ceilings, they'd have steeples. So what are they trying to make people? Not people of the earth, but people looking up. And so anyway, okay, so they're building a city for Pharaoh, and Exodus ends with them building a city for God, but then something very surprising happens after they finish his house, the first part of the city. What happens? Moses is unable to enter the house, okay? Which then sets us up for Leviticus. And Leviticus starts with what? Remember? Netzanet? How does Leviticus start? God's calling out from the house to Moses, okay? And so that introduces the thought that you've moved from dwelling place, God's house being called a dwelling place in Exodus, to a meeting place. So now Leviticus is all about, or Exodus is all about, hey, there's a house being built in the neighborhood. Whose house is it? That's kind of what Exodus is about. And then they determine it's God's house. And then Leviticus is about, okay, how do we live with God's house in our neighborhood? And that's what Leviticus is about, the meeting place. How you get into that house, how you interact to keep that house clean and to keep it there. Because in Ezekiel, God will move out of his house and move out of the city. In other words, I'm done living among you. You're profaning my name. And so Leviticus starts with God explaining to his people how to come in to his house. And then Leviticus has a bit of a surprising ending, because how does Leviticus end? Vows. And how do vows complement the beginning of Leviticus? How do they fit together? What's that? Okay, that's for sure. You do. You return to the house of God to pay your vows. Definitely. There's something deeper there. There's something deeper. Yes. You stay there in heart. You get up and go back to your life, but a vow done rightly is you've repaid it, and that repayment is essentially the equivalent of saying, I'm not leaving. I'm going to go back to be a carpenter. I'm going to go back to, raise my family, but I'm still here. That's the essence of it. And way beyond that is the fact that this is all a bit of an unseen thing. Like, God's house doesn't have to be physically present. Like David talks about the sacrifices. I'd give you a sacrifice if you wanted it, but I know what you really want is a broken and contrite heart. So all of these things are just symbols. They're symbols. You could repay a vow wrongly, probably. But it'd kind of be hard because you'd be praising God with all your friends and family and poor people in your area. So it'd be kind of hard to fake it. But I suppose somebody could. But the point is that the way that God's house is going to be most happy in the neighborhood is you just praising God and feasting and enjoying the glory of God wherever you're at. That's what it's like. So God's house is most happy when you're most happy in it. So John Piper has a really good way of saying it. He says, God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. And that's exactly what the vow offering's about. God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied, not in our answered prayers, but in him. But we can rejoice in our answered prayers. It's just there's levels. There's levels of satisfaction. So my friend that I shared that spoke at our church, he's thrilled that his wife's back. He's thrilled. But he says anytime somebody says it's the end of the story, I correct them. Because it's not the end of the story. I don't know what's going to happen the rest of my life. And it doesn't matter because I've figured out what God's like. And that is enough. That's what matters. And so his hope is not in the stuff of earth. He's a man of heaven. And that's what God's calling all of us to be. So how does the end of Leviticus open and pave a way into the opening of Numbers, which starts with a census? That seems kind of herky-jerk. How does the vow offering blend with the census? Yeah, have your Bibles open to Numbers and just kind of look. Just again, remember guys, listen, we need to read our Bibles like this. And then we need to read them like this. Okay? That's maybe the best way I can tell you to read the Torah. You read it close, so close, so close, so close. But then you step way back and say, okay, what's big picture? How is this like that? That kind of thing. Okay? I'm not being totally fair to you because it starts with the census, but that census is really part of a bigger opening, as is often the case. Like Genesis, like I said, it's the creation of the world. But then there's also man, right? So that's kind of all part of the beginning. And with the census, it's the beginning for sure, but then it gets a little bit broadened. Okay? Just look at your subheadings. Those are often helpful. They're not always right. Like the Book of the Covenant. I meant to point that out. When we went through Exodus 21 to 23 and showed how the commandments were explained, the 10 words became paragraphs in the Book of Covenant, those chapter headings were very unhelpful. I think they missed it. Do you guys remember that? Yeah. Those weren't helpful. But a lot of times they are helpful. So this one starts out with the census of Israel's warriors. And then it goes to what? Yeah, okay. So Gemachis is looking at verse 47. Do you see that? Is that what you're looking at, Gemachis? Or no? Oh, you went a little bit further? Yeah, because the firstborns are talked about in a little bit. Yeah, they're talked about in chapter 3. But you're not totally wrong because the Levites are the replacement for the firstborn. Okay? But all I want you guys to see is Numbers 1 starts out with a census of Israel's warriors, and then it goes into the Levites. All right? Now, okay, when God creates the world, it says in Genesis 2, I think it is, at the very beginning of Genesis 2, and thus the heavens and the earth were created, and all their, anybody remember the word that's used? Host. Okay. That word host is a military term. It gives you the picture that all of creation is going like this. They're all marching perfectly. Like it's an organized system now. Like God took what was the watery mass and gave it form and gave it fullness, and now it is a well-oiled machine like Solomon's kingdom that the Queen of Sheba will be like, whoa, this is unbelievable. Okay? Okay, so just like the first creation, now Israel's warriors are like the first creation. They are an organized system. They're all numbered, they're all organized. It's ready to go. But then what gets introduced after the warriors? The Levites. Now, do the Levites remind us of anything? Okay, the cherubim? Is that what you're saying? Mount Sinai? With the swords? Okay. All right, I'm thinking creation. Think creation. Everything's done. What comes next? Huh? Yeah, no, after man, everything. I'm saying days 1 through 6 are complete because we've got our host here. They're organized. Everything's in place. What comes after everything's completed in the creation narrative? Which day? Day 7. Okay. That is what I think is going on here. The host is in place, and now we're introduced to the Levites, which are separate from the host. And the Levites represent what? Rest. Day 7. Rest. Because here's the idea. Guys, you just gotta think through this with me. Think through this. Okay. What did Israel just come out of? What did they leave? What did they leave Egypt looking like? Decreation. They're covered in water and it's dark. So this is a new creation situation going on. Big picture. Okay? So they are a new creation coming out of the water of Egypt, of the Red Sea. They're out now. They're a new creation. They're a moving host. And God is now calling them to go into the promised land, which will go and spread out over all the earth. So this is a new Adam mission going on, okay? And so they're an organized whole, but how was Adam supposed to conquer? What was the first full day he lived in? Day 7 was his first full day. And then it says that God rested him in the garden. And then with Noah, he rested him on Mount Ararat. And then all these associations with the number 7. That the way you are to conquer is not through muscle. It's not through chariots. It's not through swords. It's through rest in God. Conquering in the rest of God by the strength of God. That is what it's, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. I think it's Zechariah says. And so rest is the ticket. What does Psalm 127 say? In vain do you rise early. In vain do your watchmen watch the town. It's unless the Lord builds the house, the laborers labor in vain. So all from the beginning of the Bible, it has been in conquering in the rest of God. Okay? All right. So I'm getting to how the ending of Leviticus vow fits with Numbers 1. Okay? So you've got the warriors, and then you've got the Levites introduced. And then, so that's day 7, and then you end up focusing on the Levites, which I'm calling day 7. Okay? So look at chapter 2. Okay. So what do we have as central? Look at the first 2 verses. This is talking about the arrangement of the camp. Okay, Abel says, the tent of meeting at the center. Okay, so what you have then is you've got the camps being set up around okay, so these are the camps being set up around the tabernacle. And what does verse 2 say? All right, so guys, these boxes are a cluster of tents, okay? So these are like a lot of tents, okay? But where does every single one of all of these tents have their door facing? Yep. It's coming all pointing here. So if you picture all of these as tents, they're all looking this direction. Okay? And then which direction does the tabernacle face? Okay, which means the most holy section of the tabernacle is which direction? Okay. And what does the sun do? Where does the sun rise? And where does it set? Okay. Are you familiar with Psalms that talk about from the rising of the sun to its setting, let the name of the Lord be praised? You with me? Where do you think that came from? You think they're just sitting there and they're saying, hey, I got an idea. The Lord should be praised all day. So from the time that the sun comes up to the time that it goes down, the name of the Lord should be praised. Or do you think that that was written from the fact that every morning in Israel's history, the sun rose and set all in proximity to the Lord's house? Do you guys see that? Are you guys with me? Are we groggy this morning? So, guys, this is where those verses come from. The sun rises here and it sets in the most holy section. So the name of the Lord should be praised from the rising of the sun till its setting. It's all in proximity to the tabernacle. It's all in proximity to the Lord's house. When it says, I'm going to dwell in the shadow of his wings, what are they talking about? What am I pointing to right here? Ark of the Covenant. What's on the Ark of the Covenant? Cherubim. What do they have? So what's that person talking about? I'm going to dwell in the shadow of his wings, under the shadow of his wings. What are they talking about? They're talking about, in my mind and in my heart, I'm dwelling in the Holy of Holies with the Lord. Okay? So every time you ever see anything like, the Psalms are really, guys, just quick question. How many books is the Psalms? Huh? It's 5 books. Did you guys know that? The Psalms are broken into 5 books, and yet it's one book. What does that sound like? See, guys, listen. You can't write Psalm 2 after Psalm 1 tells you to meditate on the law day and night. You cannot write Psalm 2. Because Psalm 1 just told you, meditate on the law day and night. So, Doggy, come up here, Doggy. Okay, so you stand over here. Okay. You tell me very forcefully to meditate on the law day and night.
Thou shalt meditate on the law day and night.
Okay. Now, you have to yell at me, okay?
Yeah. Meditate on the law day and night. Meditate on the law day. Start writing and meditate on the law.
My writing is meditating on the law day and night. And we're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Psalm 2 can't be written if Psalm 1's right, unless Psalm 2 is a meditation on the law day and night. Joshua 1 is the first book after the Torah, and the first thing you read in Joshua 1 is meditate on the law day and night. And then Joshua starts writing his book, and Moses, dead Moses, comes up out of the grave and says, hey, I told you, meditate on the law day and night. And he starts writing again, hey, I told you. Joshua's like, Moses, me writing this is meditating on the law. And he says, okay. Okay, so everything after the law is a meditation on the law. Okay? So whenever you read stuff in the rest of the Bible, you have to say, how does this relate to the law? But then you also have to say that the law was never fulfilled. So how does this relate to Jesus? So everything between, everything from Moses on, you have to ask, how does this relate to the law? And everything from Moses on before Jesus, you have to say, how does this relate to Jesus? So these are the movements, okay? All right. So they all surround the camp, okay? And one of the things that we see is that they're arranged in great order. You've got, let me see here. Okay. So you've got you guys tell me which direction is first as you do it. Who's first? East? Okay, east is Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Okay? So this is Judah here. All right? Which is significant because Judah is protecting the entrance to the tabernacle. Do you see that? Okay? And then they're all from Leah. Judah, Issachar, Zebulun. Okay, what's the next direction? South. Okay. So then we've got south over here, and south is Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. And those are between Leah and her handmaid, Zilpah. So they're connected. Okay? And then does it go west or north? It goes west? Okay. So then it goes west, and west is Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. What do those guys have in common? Those are descendants from Rachel, ultimately. Okay. And then you have up north, you've got Dan, Asher, Naphtali, and those are a conglomeration of both handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah. Okay? So, just to point out here, what you have is, first of all, is there a method of movement? Do you see that? Do you see that movement? that it goes from east to south to west to north. So there's, it's encircling the tent, which is at the center. And then you're like, oh, well, that just happened. Well, it didn't just happen when you find out that all of these have to do with Leah, and all of these have to do with Rachel, and then Rachel and Leah. Rachel only had so many kids, so she's smaller. Okay, but you see Leah, Rachel, Leah. Okay, so I just want you to see there's organization here. They all face the tabernacle. There's a circle drawn around the tabernacle in the way that it goes around the camp. Okay? And so all of this is still answering the question as to Leviticus 27. How does the vow offering have to do with Numbers opening? And I hope you're beginning to see it. The vow offering was the best way to have communication with God. Guys, how did the namesake of Israel start? How did Jacob start? Do you remember when he's leaving like a thief with the blessing and he comes to Bethel? What happens? What's that? He makes a vow. God makes incredible promises to him and he makes a vow. Okay? So there's a sense in which, Israel's namesake started with a vow. And then vow becomes very important throughout their history. Okay? So the best way to focus on the tabernacle was with the vow. And then he starts with focusing on the tabernacle. Why? Why such focus on the tabernacle about to enter into the promised land? Why such focus? What's that? That's exactly right. It's their only hope, guys. You win wars by worship. You win by worshiping. So you will take over Addis Ababa in the worship of God by the worship of God. Worship is war. The happier your hearts are in God here, the greater the ripple effect you'll have out there. The more lackluster of worship you are here, the fact that it's just going to flake out there. So worship wins wars. That's the deal. Worship wins wars. Okay? All right. So then we find out how the camp takes off. Okay? How it moves. Okay? So how does the camp move? Where do we find that? Okay, it's end of the first paragraph in chapter 2, verse 9. Okay, so who heads out first? Verse 9. Okay, so the east side sets out first. Okay, so you've got Judah. Here's Judah, and he starts the movement. Okay, then who follows him? The south? Is that right? Okay, so let's make our arrow here now, down here. All right, so we've got Judah. Okay. Judah and Issachar and Zebulun are all part of the same camp. Okay? So Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun take off together. Then who's next? Say that? The tabernacle. Okay, so look at verse 17. Then the tent of meeting shall set out with the camp of the Levites in the midst of the camps. Okay, so you've got the tabernacle, and we'll learn a little bit more about that soon. Okay, so you got the tabernacle, and then what have you got? Of Gad. Yes, okay. So you do have the south, yes, excuse me. What we'll find later is that one group of the priests that have the tent leave earlier. We'll learn that in a little bit. Okay, so next is the south side. Okay, and then what? Then the tab. Then you've got the tab. Okay. And then what do you got? What's that? The west. And then what do you got? Okay. So when it's time to go, look at what happens. So we'll just do east instead of Judah, but so when it comes time to go, it goes like this. You see that? Okay, so guys, like just think of viewing this from 30,000 feet. Do you see the organization to it? So there's organization every which way. And these are the type things, like when you're reading your Bible and you start looking at these details, you know what you should do? You should always be asking the question, I wonder if there's something to this. You should just always ask that question. Because I think there is all the time. Like, just chase it out. Why does he put these tribes together? Then you find out, oh, these are from Leah, Rachel and Leah. Okay? There's all kinds of purpose here. Okay? All right, so then they move, and so guys, when they move, is there anything similar about how they march as to how they camp? Look at these pictures. What do you have? Is there anything in the center? The tabernacle. Again, just like it's in the center of the camp, it's in the center of the marching order, which says that what is most central to Israel's world? Worship. Worship. Worship is your relationship with God is the most important thing about you. A.W. Tozer said, what a man thinks about God is the most important thing about him. So your worship is always the most important thing. Okay, but now where do we get into with chapter 3? What does it focus on? The sons of Aaron. Okay, now we get into the duties of the Levites. We see that we have a new priest on the scene, Eleazar and Ithamar. Nadab and Abihu are dead. So Eleazar is going to be the one that replaces Aaron when Aaron dies. Okay? All right, so then look at verse 5. And now it's focusing on the Levites and their duties and their formation. Okay? So you have ultimately 4 sets of Levites. You've got Moses and Aaron. You've got Kohath, Gershon, and Merari. Okay? So you essentially have 4 divisions of priests, priest formations and duties. Okay, so look at verse 17. Okay, you'll see, and these were the sons of Levi by their names, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Okay, so look at verse 21. That's when they start talking about who? Gershon, okay? So where does Gershon camp? Because guys, check this out. Look at the screen real quick. Okay. So now we're going to zoom in on the camp because you've got the tribes here, but in front of the tribes are the priests. They directly surround the tabernacle, and then the tribes are beyond them. Okay? So we're starting to talk about Gershon, and where does he camp in front of the tabernacle? To which direction? To the west. Okay? Whoops. So here you have the Levites, and that's Gershon. Okay? Then 27 starts Kohath. Where does Kohath camp? To the south. Kohath. Okay? Then you start Merari. And where does he camp? North. Okay? And then who goes directly in front of the tabernacle? On the east. Moses and Aaron. Okay. So this description goes from which direction to which direction to which direction? It starts west, and then it goes south, then it goes north, and then it goes east. Why do you think that is? That's an easy one, right? I mean, they're like Judah. They're the leaders. They're the most prominent, okay? So that's an easy one. Why don't you think he goes in a direction like he did before? He starts over here, does this, does this. Any ideas? So he starts in the west. What's in the west? Okay, the most significant part of the tabernacle. Okay. How does the tabernacle always move when it gives you the furniture? From the inside to the out. Okay, so guys, I truly don't know the answer to this question. I don't know that anybody can say for sure. But here's what we know. As Isaiah said, it's pretty clear that the most significant people are to the east, because we already know that with Judah. Okay? We all through Exodus, and obviously we couldn't spend as much time on it as I would like, but we always see the trajectory move from inside to out. And this goes to what I was talking to Israel about, that the Old Testament is missional, right? God's glory is going out into the ends of the earth. God's glory is going out into the ends of the earth. It was supposed to do that from Eden, and it's supposed to do that all the time, okay? So here's all I'm kicking around. You've got glory here with the Ark of the Covenant, and then you've got two side camps. How did Israel get out of Egypt? Through a door. They went through the door, the bloody door to go out there. Okay? And then you end up east. So I'm just wondering if this is the glory of God, and in the way that the tabernacle gives you its furniture, it moves from the glory out into the world. It provides essentially a passageway, or it's just giving you the sides of the tabernacle. It may not be making a door here, it may just be making, okay, here's glory, here's the sides, because it always moves from the Holy of Holies to the holy place, to the courtyard, to the outer world. So I'm just wondering if that's what's at play here, in that west is given west is given first and east is given last. Okay? Okay. So, what do we know about these guys in chapter 3, verse 8 and verse 7? What are these priests to do? Seven and 8. It says it 3 times. Okay? What does that sound like? Yep. What Adam should have done in the garden, what the cherubim did in place of Adam. Okay, they're to guard it. And then look at the end of verse 10 of chapter 3. Yep. Anybody unclean coming in to the tabernacle complex shall be murdered. They are the new cherubim. This is the new Eden. They are the new cherubim. And they're guarding the tabernacle complex. That's what's happening. Okay. And then just to reiterate this, look at the end of verse 38. Oh, well, yeah, let's just read. I'm going to read all of 38. You ready? Those who were to camp before the tabernacle on the east, that's Moses and Aaron, before the tent of meeting, toward the sunrise, were Moses and Aaron and his sons, guarding the sanctuary itself to protect, to guard the people of Israel. And any outsider who came near was to be put to death. Okay, so guys, here's the deal. If Israel keeps Eden intact and guards it from any evil outsiders, God will go before them. What we'll learn later is that the ark, of all the tabernacle stuff that marched in the middle, the ark probably marched at the very, very front of Israel. So, if Israel keeps their camp intact, God's area intact, the world will be conquered. And that's why, when it comes to a church, if a church keeps its heart and mind, theology, and love of God intact, the world will be conquered. If either one of those is off, it won't happen. If you have the best theology on planet Earth, you are no better than a demon if you don't have heart that is in love with God. But you could have what you think is great love for God, but if it's misinformed, then you're not loving the right God. You're loving somebody else's craft of God. So this is Israel. It starts by talking about soldiers, and then it moves right into talking about worship, because it's not about might. It's not about power. That's why everybody missed Jesus, because they thought it was with might and power that God was going to conquer, and that's not how God was going to conquer. God likes to conquer through weakness, because that's what makes him able to demonstrate his strength fully. My power is made perfect in one thing: weakness. And so it starts by talking to all these soldiers, and everyone's like, war paint, let's get on, let's get ready. And he's like, all right, let's everybody go to church. And you're like, that's how he wins. And so this is the deal. We can't miss this. You win by day 7. You win by resting in the strength of God. Okay, now we're in your section, okay? And this is really important, okay? Gemenshi's already pointed out, how are firstborns related to priests? How are firstborns related to priests? Because initially, guys, what was the plan? Who were going to be the priests? The firstborn. They were all going to be the priests, the firstborn. But remember, this is so beautiful. Remember how firstborn is not about birth order in the Bible as much, it is sometimes, as much as it is about who is most like me. So this is exactly what God did with Israel and the church. He says, I've called you my firstborn all these years, but you're nothing like me. Like at all. You go to nations and you make them think I'm horrible because you're not like me. So I'm going to give the title, the status of firstborn effectively to those who produce fruit, the church, Gentiles. Now, it doesn't mean that Israel's not still in God's plan, because they are, but they're not like him. So he transfers. And you got the firstborns of Israel, but then you've got the tribe of Levi, that when the golden calf comes out, they stand up in one team to do it. And it's marvelous. So they get the status of firstborn. So Israel still pays their tithes and pays a redemption for their firstborn. So my firstborn is Finn. I would say, okay, I'm not from the tribe of Levi, but I still pay as though I'm giving them Finn. But that goes to the priests now, the Levites, because they're the priests. Okay? All right. So it goes to talking about the redemption of the firstborn, and then it goes to talk about what the priests do. So this is all about worship, guys. Before it's ever about war, it's all about worship. So we're talking about the priests. All right. Who does it talk about first in chapter 4? Kohath. Okay. And what does Kohath have to do with? What are their duties? What do they carry of the tabernacle stuff? Okay. Verse 5, what do they carry? What's that? Okay, they carry the most holy stuff. So yeah, verse 5, they carry, verse 4 just tells you straight up, they carry the most holy things. Then it tells you what are the most holy things. It's the ark in verse 5. It's the table in verse 7. It's the lampstand in verse 8. And it's the golden altar in verse 11. Okay? Now, I'm going to be really annoying with you guys, all right? But let's be annoying together. All right, verse 5 is the ark. And then it tells you what you cover the ark with, starting in verse 6. So you guys read to me, so I'm going to draw the ark here, and you tell me what covers it. What's the first thing that covers it? The veil. What's the second thing that covers it? Goatskin? Okay, what's the third thing that covers it? What? Blue. Okay, then we go to, oh, I'm such a dummy. I could have done that all with color. That would have been so cool. Yeah, all right, you guys go to the next one and tell me what's next. The what? The table, okay? The table, what's the first thing that covers it? What's that? Blue. All right, what's the next thing that covers it? Scarlet. Okay, what's the next thing that covers it? I can't really find a brown on here. Oh, there's kind of a brown. All right, then a goat skin. Okay, and goat skin was there. All right, what's next? The lampstand? Okay. What's the first thing that covers the lampstand? Blue? Okay. All right, what's next? Goat skin? Okay. Is that it for the lampstand? Or, yep, okay. All right, and then what's next? Golden altar. Okay. 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 Is that it? What's that? Oh, the service, vessels of the service go. Oh, on the, what's that?
After the golden altar,
So other material.
Which verse are you at? Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is the vessels. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll just do a little cup, little plate. All right. What goes there? What's first? Okay. Okay. All right. So we are in a place now to. All right. Do you notice anything? What's that? Okay. Very good. Yep. Okay, so the blue is the first in every other thing except the ark. Yes. All right, what else? Do the opposite of that. What's the opposite of that? Yeah, the only thing from the center, the inside of the tabernacle veil is on the ark. Okay. What's the last covering that covers everything? I wish I would have drawn in bigger colors or a bigger thing. Let me see if I can do that. All right, so I'm gonna highlight the blue. Whoops, now I'm erasing the blue. All right, let's see. Okay, you got blue, 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 and then I'm going to highlight the brown. You got brown, goat skin, goat skin, goat skin. What do you notice? Okay, you're going way deeper on me than I was planning on. That's not that it's wrong necessarily. I have to think about it, but guys, what's a very simple thing? You're marching out of the camp and you see all of these things in the center of your group being carried, and one of these things is not like the other. What color do you see? What surface or material do you see on everything covered? It's the last thing you see covering it. Goat skin. It's the last thing. Goat skin. Goat skin. Goat skin. Goat skin. Do you see? Okay, so what this means is that the ark stands out. It's different. It's to draw your attention. And this isn't the only way. Because when you look at in the tabernacle, when you look at because were these things carried on carts or were they carried by hand? They were carried by hand, right? Remember Uzzah, where it tips over, he touches it because it was on a cart and he dies, okay? So they were to be carried with poles. Now here's what's interesting. On the Ark of the Covenant, this is where the poles are sectioned. So here's the Ark. Here's the cover. Here's the cherubim. And you've got the feet. Okay? Do you know where the pole holes are on the ark? Uniquely from everything else? Okay. So, where's, as far as height, where's the ark? Because you've got things like the altar, the golden altar is like this, and on that one the pole holes are up here, and the table's a little bit more confusing, honestly, but because it says it's on its feet, but then it also says it's right below the thing. So, and I'm not building these things right, but so this is, So here's the idea. When you carry the ark, you're carrying it, the bottom of it is on your shoulders, and then it rises. When you carry everything else, basically your head, it's closer to your head in one way or another. So of all the things you carry, the ark is the highest. And it's the only thing marked by a different color. Okay? So that's just really important to catch the symbolism, because God doesn't tell you this for nothing. So what can you equate this with? When God comes on a mountain, where does he go to the mountain? All the time. He goes to the top. Right? Why? Because God is always highest and best. And so he's telling you this in a million different ways. Okay? Now, I'm not trying to be boring with you guys. What I'm trying to tell you is, anytime you're reading his law, get into the details, because they're trying to tell you something. That's what we're doing. Okay? Okay, so then after he tells you all of these things, now, guys, by the way, which tribe was it? Well, I'm going to save that. I'm going to save it. Okay. All right. We'll take a break here in just a little bit. Let's just get a little bit further. Okay? Okay, so who can be priests? Levites. What ages can they be priests? Huh? Say what? No. Huh? 30 years in a... No. You got one part right. 30 was right. To what? All right, look at verse 29. Or verse 23, or verse 35. What's that? Yes, 30 to 50. 30 to 50. Okay? Why? Because, and you know, you can't have a crushed testicle. You know, what is he doing? You can't be married to a divorced woman. You got to be 30 to 50. Basically, he's saying he's designating that this is the prime age that he wants his people. Okay. Now, I'd be open to thinking, okay, day 3, day 4, day 5, you know, they're to be like stars. They light the candle, the lampstand. I don't know. It's interesting, 30 to 50, but that's the ages, okay? All right, so now at the end of chapter 4, what are we done talking about? What did we just finish talking about? We've been talking a ton about it and them so far. What is it and them? The tabernacle's the it, and who's the them? The Levites, the priests. Yes, okay. So we've been talking about essentially what? What part of the camp have we been talking about? This inner circle, right? So it essentially went from talking about like a really tight circle, and then it goes out, and then it starts talking about, in chapter 5, what? Unclean people where? In the camp. Yeah, right. So it's unclean people in the camp go where? Outside the camp. So what you're seeing is, is you're moving. It's moving out. Do you see that? Okay. So that's chapter 5, verses 1 to 4. Both male and female, they'll go outside the camp because he's focusing on this section now, is what he's focusing on. Okay? And then confession and restitution. So if you become dirty in this area, what do you do to stay in that area? That's what Leviticus is all about. That's how it starts. Okay, and then it talks about our test of adultery that we've been talking about so much this week. Okay? All right. And do you see, guys, just stop a second. Do you see how all of this is part of a movement? It's starting inside and it's moving out into the camp. And when it starts talking about the camp, it starts talking about adultery. Because what is God concerned about happening in his camp? Not a woman sleeping with another man. Yes, that's a concern. He doesn't want that to happen. What's the bigger concern? What's he pointing to? The spiritual fidelity of his people. The spiritual faithfulness of the people in this area. That's what he's talking about. And yes, it applies to husbands and wives. But in a more real way, in a bigger way, it's applying to them as a covenant people, right? Because when God was giving Moses directions on how to build the tabernacle, what was all this people doing in the camp? Committing adultery with a golden calf. So he's telling them, be faithful. That's what the test of adultery is all about in chapter 5. And then it gets into chapter 6, which demonstrates what the highest and purest form of faithfulness looks like. And surprise, surprise, it has to do with how did Leviticus end? With a vow. Look at chapter 6. The Nazirite vow. Okay? And what's the Nazirite vow? Does he cut his hair? Does he trim his vines, which is like earth's hair? No, he doesn't even touch a grape. He can't even touch his vines to trim them. So he lets his hair go freely. He doesn't cut the hair of the earth, which is like vines. Vines that are like hair of the earth. Okay? He doesn't touch anything. I think it doesn't, isn't there, yeah. He has absolutely nothing to do with death. Look at verse 7. even for his father or for his mother, or brother or sister, if they die, shall he make himself unclean, because his separation to God is on his head. Do you guys, the high priest can never attend a funeral. Did you know that? High priest, never. Ever. When he's high priest, he cannot attend a funeral. Can't be near death. Why? Because God is unadulterated life. So when you separate yourself to God through the Nazirite vow, you are separating yourself to life. So your hair grows freely. The vines grow freely. You don't touch them. You don't go anywhere near a dead person. You are separated yourself to life. Now, I'm going to go a little weird on you now. I'm going to go a little weird on you, okay? So I could be off here, okay? Could be off. Just bear with me and don't judge me, okay? Paul grew up as an Israelite. What does he say about men with long hair? Should they have long hair or should they not? They should not. They should cut it, okay? So this is the exception, because this guy's going to have long hair. As long as his vow is, right, he's going to have hair growing long. He's totally dedicated to God. This just came after the test of adultery, where God's calling Israel his, well, before adulteress, what's he calling her? His bride. Are you tracking with me? What's this guy starting to look like? Are you with me? Israel, men, we're not supposed to have long hair. This is the one exception where they do, and it's right after they're basically told that they are God's bride. Only women could have long hair. I have a suspicion that he's not trying to make us effeminate. He's not trying to make us like girls, but he's saying, look, in covenant faithfulness to me, because you are my bride, the highest form of a vow relationship is the Nazirite vow, and you end up looking like a bride. I mean, an ugly one, super ugly one. You kind of look like Judah, right? You're ugly, right? Okay, so yeah, it's just a thought to throw out there. Don't hold it against me. But this is what the highest form in this area, he wants everybody to effectively be what? Nazirites. He wants them to be wholly committed to him. And if that happens, look at how Numbers chapter 6 ends. What does it end with? An Aaronic blessing, right? And look at, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Guys, a blessing is a very special thing, and here's why. And guys, I strongly encourage you, I don't do it enough, but anytime I have done it, it has been very special to bless someone close to you, okay? And what that means is that you're praying to God while looking at the person in the eye. So I'm looking at Net Senate, but I'm praying to God. But my eyes are open, and we're making eye contact. So it's a very emotional thing, because it's one thing to pray for someone with your eyes closed, that's special, but it's different than looking someone eye to eye and pronouncing a blessing on them from God. That's just a really special thing. And this is what God is effectively doing and saying, if you, Israel, in this area are totally committed to me like a bride, like a faithful bride, male or female, my light will shine on you in a special way. Okay? And that brings us in to chapter 7. And this is where you see the light of God's countenance come on the tabernacle. How do we see that? Look at verse 7:1. What do you see in verse 7:1? Anointing. Okay? What do you anoint with? Okay? Where's the first time we were introduced to oil? In relation to what? We had to move fast through it, so you probably don't remember. It was in relation, the first time we see oil. Oh, you're talking about Jacob? Yes, that's very good. That's not where I was going, but that is before what I'm saying. And it even builds the case stronger, okay? The first time we see oil used post Jacob is in the tabernacle in relation to the lampstand, okay? So oil is what James Jordan calls, remember how I called gold material light? Oil is liquid light. Okay? So, and Bethel was the anointed stone. So it was, it's what we're about to describe here, which is that this area is anointed. It's a city on a hill. It's a light. When you put if I were to take anointing oil, I especially would shine, me and Asayas, because we're more bald. Because when light shines off oil, what happens? It gets bright, right? And so he moves from chapter 6, where he says, the Lord's face shine upon you, to anoint your tent. Do you see how those two things fit together? He's shining on the tent, and now the tent is anointed. It's becoming lit up. Okay? So that's the whole consecration of the tabernacle. As people, each tribe brings their stuff in equal measure. So everybody's unified. The tabernacle is anointed. Everybody's doing great. And then turn, after the huge dedication ceremony of chapter 7, look at what chapter 8 starts with. What's that? Lamps. Okay, but look at specifically what it says. And we've been over this, so I spent a ton of time. What does it say? What does it say, guys? Help me out.
Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and say to him, When you set up the lamps, the 7 lamps shall give light in front of the lampstand.
All right. Okay, so this is my depiction here, okay? All right, so here you've got the lampstand, and here you've got the table of showbread with 12 tribes of Israel on it, and he says, direct them to shine their light towards the what? Towards the what? In front of the lampstand. Doesn't it say direction too? Towards the... Does it not? Maybe I got that wrong. Okay, just in front of the lampstand. Okay. But what we know is that from Exodus, the lampstand goes south, and the table of showbread is to the north. Okay? So what is the lamp doing? Shines in the direction of the bread. Okay? So what God's saying in number 6 is, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you. Right? May his countenance be lifted up upon you. In number 6, in the blessing. Then, after Israel consecrates the tent, he says, okay, set up the lampstand. Well, first of all, let's go in order. May the Lord bless you, keep you. May his face shine upon you. May his countenance be lifted up upon you. Anoint the tent. They anoint the tent. The tent gets lit up symbolically, right? Then everybody, all the tribes dedicate. So now the tribes, the loaves of bread represents the tribes. Now the tribes are all bringing their stuff to the tent. The priests have already been ready to go. So now the tribes, the 12 bread, 12 loaves, bring their stuff. And then he says, okay, now set up the lampstand and make sure the candles are pointing towards in front of them, which is where the table is. And so what he's saying is now my light has been on the tent. Now my light is over all the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? And so this should have given great encouragement to Israel in their obedience to God. That he just blessed them and said, okay, you've been faithful in all of your tribes bringing your gifts to the tent, which happened in chapter 7. And they all did the same thing. And he says, now my face is going to shine upon you in a special way. Okay? So we're good to go on that. And all of this is in preparation to enter into the promised land. And so let me go to and get caught up here. Preparation to go. We got the census host, central tabernacle, preparing tab for travel, preparing camp for travel, dedication, light, dedication, light. Okay. So Israel is ready to go. And then we get to 8 and 10. We'll take a break right after this. 8 to 10 is essentially the newborn Israelites. So it's effectively like they're fresh out of Egypt and they're ready to go. Look at what they do to the priest in chapter 8, verse 7. What do you do to these poor guys? Chapter 8, verse 7. Yep, you cleanse them, sprinkle water of purification, and let them go with a razor all over their body. Okay? What does that make them like? Okay, Asay said shed. Oh, shiny, okay. All right, you guys are between 20 and 30, okay? Is there any age on earth that is, you guys all have hair, right? Is there any age on earth that doesn't have any hair on their body? A baby. Remember what Israel was when they came out of Egypt? Through a narrow, bloody door. After being called the firstborn, then they passed through a narrow channel of water. Okay, and then look in this chapter, what are they called? Look down at verse 16. For they are wholly given to me from among the people of Israel. Instead of all who open the womb, the firstborn of all the people of Israel, I have taken for myself. For all the firstborn among the people of Israel are mine, both of man and beast. And on that day I struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. I consecrated them for myself. And I have taken the Levites instead of all the firstborn among all the people of Israel. And I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron as his sons among the people of Israel. to do the service for the people of Israel at the tent of meeting and make atonement for the people of Israel, that there may be no plague among the people of Israel that come near the sanctuary. What does he affect? He says firstborn a bunch of times. He's talking about these guys shaving their whole bodies. What is he making them like? You cannot enter the kingdom of heaven unless you enter like a child. So, Israel is starting fresh as his firstborn, and then he celebrates, he says the priests need to be 30 to 50 years old, and at 50th they retire. So this is another way of saying they're young, they're youth, okay? And then Passover is celebrated, as if to say, you are my babies, you are my children, okay? Because Passover had lots of earth, or newborn imagery. And then they're taken to, they have the cloud covering the tabernacle. What should that remind us of? When's the last time we've seen a cloud cover something? Yep. Covering, well, before that even. Sinai. So it covered Sinai, then it covers the tabernacle. Now it's back here. So they are like fresh Israel ready to go. After all the trouble they've had, they're like fresh Israel ready to go after the golden calf and all that. Then the silver trumpets blow. What are the silver trumpets like? Silver is associated with the sky. We learned that. What was flashing on Mount Sinai? Thunder and lightning, and a trumpet horn was heard. Okay? So now they're blowing trumpets. So what are they replicating? They're replicating the Sinai experience as they leave. And then the second big heading in Numbers 10 is Israel leaves Sinai. So guys, does it get any more exciting than this? They are ready to get into the land. That's pretty cool. They're ready to roll. This is good. All right, let's take a break.